on. I want to note that Representative Steve Owens is with us, and Representative Leonard Mira on the House side is with us, and I'm certain that we will get more who will join us during the hearing, and I will let you know when they arrive. But thank you for the opportunity, and looking forward to today's hearing.
Thank you, Representative. So this is a hearing. I'm going to introduce my fellow senators on the panel in a moment, but this is a hearing on a number of bills. Most of them revisit a topic that we initially legislated for in the Climate Act of 2021, the Climate Policy Roadmap Bill. But the bills have come before us again, and fortunately so, I think. In terms of members of the Senate who are here, I had misread some of the abbreviations. I guess there are no Senate members of TUE currently with us, but I hope that they will join in due time. And if I'm wrong about that and somebody's here now, by all means, text me. Why don't we then commence the hearing itself? There are in total 9 bills, I think, before us today. We do want to hear legislators out of turn, as we always do, and we particularly want to hear from members of the House because they have a caucus starting soon enough, and then we will get to members of the Senate, I promise. So with that, I wanted to welcome Representative Sokolow, Representative Vitolo, and there may be, we've got other reps that we want to get on very quickly as well, Representative Gouveia and Representative Conley. However you wish to constitute yourselves, why don't we hear from the first panel?
And I just understood that Representative Fernandez from the House has joined us. Thank you, Senator Barrett.
Terrific. Good to hear. Do we have am I correct that Representative Sokolow and Representative Vitolo are on the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rep. Sokolow here. I appreciate you taking us out of turn and getting us started early so that we can get to our caucus. I'm here with the panel with Representative Vitolo, and Rep. Garbely was going to join as well, but he is with the Speaker on other matters right now, so you may see him later. But we collectively represent Lexington and Brookline, and of course, Rep. Garbely, Arlington. And I'm here to specifically speak to H3893, Lexington's Home Rule Petition, an act authorizing the town of Lexington to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure in certain conditions. This Home Rule Petition, in my opinion, is one of the most important things that Lexington has advanced in a number of years to help us fight climate change. And while we appreciate that the importance of the state pursuing a statewide plan to upgrade the state building code. We know that that building code, stretch energy code, is delayed and may not go nearly as far as we need it to go to. Net zero is different than absolute zero, and Lexington is seeking to limit the hookup of new fossil fuel infrastructure in new construction. So no gas or oil in new buildings, and also in major renovations. But there are really smart and key exemptions for obvious things like home cooking, gas cooking, generators, large-scale water heaters for buildings over 10,000 square feet, life science, et cetera. So there are very smart provisions in this that enables it not to really have a negative impact on Lexington's ability to continue to build housing and commercial buildings. But it's important to note in Lexington that we have approximately 75 to 100 teardowns a year and build single-family homes. Approximately 8,000 square feet is the average in gross square feet. In a 2-year period, we are going to build about 1 million square feet of residential construction alone. And in my view, it would be absolutely ludicrous for us to allow those buildings to go forward with fossil fuel heating and cooling infrastructure, only to then have the state and our taxpayers pay to provide tax incentives and grants to retrofit those buildings later on. We are in a crisis in the climate situation, and we know that we need to take every aggressive move we can make. And in Lexington in particular, because our sustainable plans require us to get to net zero earlier than the state's plan. We actually, I believe our year is 2043 when we are intending to get to net zero. And those plans are promulgated by the select board and town meeting and planning boards. And without this petition, we simply won't be able to meet our local planning objectives, which is a real critical piece of why we are pursuing this. So we have a large group of people who are going to be speaking. The advocates are prepared with numbers and data and information. I won't get into it in greater detail, but I think this is a great opportunity to have a handful of communities pilot some advanced techniques so that the rest of the state can learn to follow what needs to happen in our building sector. So with that, I will yield the floor to my colleague, Rep. Vitolo.
Good morning, Chair Rory, and I'm sure he'll stick his head back in the window in a moment. Chair Barrett and members of the committee, thank you for taking me out of turn. We've got an exciting day in the House today. I'm here to speak about S-2473, an act authorizing the town of Brookline to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure in certain construction. But I'm also here to speak in favor of the other 4 home rules. The 5 are very similar. There may be some slight differences. The concept is the same, and these are 5 communities that are taking a leadership position. I'm proud that Brookline really led the way beginning in 2019 with the Warren article that was born on my front porch and was expertly shepherded by town meeting members Jesse Gray and Lisa Cunningham with the help of a number of other folks in Brookline. The Attorney General's office ruled that that policy ran afoul of 3 different pieces of state legislation on the books, and therefore, because we are a town, it could not go into effect. But that was okay. You know, we're gonna figure out other ways to do it. And so, one approach we took was through the roadmap bill to create a municipal opt-in. But as Rep. Socolo mentioned, while the specialized stretch energy code will certainly be an improvement over what we have now, and I'm hopeful that communities adopt it, I share her skepticism that it will get us to buildings not having gas installed in the first place, particularly for heating space and heating water. And that's where bills like this are so important. We know that this kind of equipment lasts 25 or 30 years. Right? Heating systems last a long time. And if we continue to install gas and oil-fired heating systems, they're going to have useful lives that extend past what the roadmap allows. And so we have to get this transition moving. And I appreciate that different communities face different challenges. And maybe we're not ready statewide in 2022 to pass the law, but these communities are ready. And so we ought to let these communities take that leadership role and demonstrate what can be done and, you know, absorb some of those early costs, slightly higher costs, so that other communities who will follow later, but will definitely follow, have an even easier path because of the efforts of communities like Arlington and Lexington and Brookline. And so I know that Brookline has sent a number of folks. I'm sure the other communities have as well. I'm not going to get into the details. I'm going to leave that for the local advocates and experts. But I do want to just make it really clear that I think we can do this now. I think that there may be room to, I don't want to say consolidate the 5 home rules, but there may be tweaks that make the 5 home rules more similar to each other so that there is some more consistency. And I think that the communities would be willing to have that conversation. I don't want to speak for all 5, but I think, you know, moving forward is important, and moving forward every session is important. This is not a once every 10 years legislate problem. This is a every 2 years we have to do better. And I'm very grateful for TUE for your work and happy to answer any questions you may have. And then I'm going to go about the 42 other things happening in the House today.
Are there questions of Representative Socolo or Representative Vitolo?
I have not a question, but a comment. I just wanted to let Rep. Socolo and Rep. Vitolo know that your third panelist Representative Garvely did reach out to me and advocated just as strongly in support of his home rule petition, and I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and thank you for your testimony.
He's a mensch, that Sean Garbely. A real good guy.
With that ringing endorsement, I'll ask if there are any more questions of our esteemed panelists, and apparently there aren't, so we want to thank you very much for your testimony. Good luck with the rest of your busy day.
Thank you so much.
At this moment, if Representative Conley is in the House, we would like to hear from Representative Conley.
Good morning, Senator Barrett. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Terrific.
There you are.
Thank you. Well, good morning to you, and good morning to Chair Roy and to members of the committee. I'm here to testify on two bills specifically, as well as the group of home rule petitions that you heard Representative Vitolo and others mention. I'm here in strong support of House Bill 2145. This is legislation that I filed, an act promoting the adoption of renewable energy for heating, cooling, and hot water. I also want to go on the record in support of House Bill 2167. This was filed by Rep. Govea, an act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by permitting local option all-electric buildings and home ordinances. And I think in keeping with the theme here, we know that our municipalities, I'm proud to be a resident of Cambridge, as well as Somerville, which is part of my district. Our municipalities are really trying to get to that net zero goal as quickly as possible. We in the legislature, took significant action last session, building on previous action with the 2050 roadmap bill. And it's unfortunate that we are continuing to wait on regulations that will be promulgated by the Baker administration. And we know that with the climate emergency, we cannot wait long. We need to take action to move away from fossil fuels and to enable true net zero design in our building stock. Just to touch briefly on the two bills that I came to speak about in particular, the bill I filed, House Bill 2145, would make a difference for many individuals and businesses that are considering the installation of alternative and renewable energy systems by making three small, discrete changes, but changes that could have a big impact. First, the bill would reduce administrative barriers to the adoption and installation of renewable energy systems by limiting the ability of zoning ordinances and bylaws to preclude them, as is now the case with respect to solar systems in some cases, for example. Second, municipalities would be empowered to have applications for permits for buildings that are new or to be substantially renovated. They would be able to require the inclusion of renewable energy and alternative energy systems. And then third, the Chapter 59 property tax exemption for solar energy systems would be extended to renewable heat pump systems as well, thereby helping to create another financial incentive. These three discrete policy changes combined could help us achieve more rapid adoption of residential and commercial renewable energy systems and could really add up. Finally, I want to express support for the local option bill filed by Rep. Govea, House Bill 2167. I think this comports with many of the home rule petitions, and I will say there's a home rule petition that is on the way from the city of Cambridge as well that will likely end up at this committee. The bill before you today would help us address the fact that, buildings account for so much of our carbon emissions, and I think would give our cities an opportunity to show that leadership that they are yearning to show. So it's a busy day. We're headed into caucus, so I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions, and want to say thank you to the chairs and to the committee for continuing to engage on this urgent issue.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there questions of Representative Conley?
I don't have a question, but did want to let you know that Vice Chair Paul Mark has joined us. Representative Mosquito has joined us, and Representative Hawkins has joined us.
Good to have so many members of the committee with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, hearing no questions, we will excuse Representative Conley, but thank him a great deal for his testimony. And now we will hear from State Representative Tammy Gouveia, if she's in the House.
Yes, thank you so very much, Mr. Chair, both chairs, for taking me out of turn. I also want to thank my colleagues for speaking so eloquently on both the home rule petitions that they filed on behalf of their municipalities, as well as speaking to H2167. Really glad to see my Senate colleague here also filed a similar enabling piece of legislation. You know, this issue around municipalities wanting to be really bold and innovative around the climate change crisis and really wanting to take responsibility came up for me 4 years ago when I was first running for office. And we know that oftentimes the test cases and the opportunities to pilot and innovate does truly happen at the local level. And what has become clear, both in the comments that my colleagues have already stipulated here, as well as through conversations with many climate activists at the municipal level, is just how much, the state is in the way of them being able to take some of that bold action. So I'm here just to request support for H4117, which is a home rule that I filed on behalf of Concord. Really excited to see colleagues representing, Cambridge, Lexington, Brookline, as well as Acton, who will also speaking to their home rules. Also here to speak in support of H2167. I don't want to belabor the points, again, that my colleagues so eloquently made, but what I think is just really important is just, again, to highlight the role that our municipal leaders really are taking, and how incredibly and important it is for so many of our residents all across the Commonwealth to accelerate moving us towards achieving our state's stated climate goals. And that must include addressing buildings. I'm so grateful to the work that this committee did, and you in particular, Senator Barrett, for your work on the Next Gen Climate Bill that did include buildings. As my colleague Rep. Socolo from Lexington highlighted, the Net Zero Stretch Energy Code piece is a really great start. We know that that bill is a great start, but there's so much more for us to do to achieve our climate goals, from ensuring that our businesses are moving forward, ensuring that the housing that we're building or reconstructing and remodeling is also adopting opportunities to achieve net zero or zero carbon emissions. So just here in, speaking and asking for a favorable report on H4117, the home rule for Concord. I know you'll be hearing from the folks there who have been deeply engaged in these conversations, not only within their own borders, but with municipalities all across the Commonwealth who are really paying attention to what they can do at the local level. And then again, of course, for H2167, and I appreciate my colleagues who are here who have also spoken in favor of H2167, which will allow municipalities to not have to come back to the legislature to adopt home rules, but that they are really empowered to be able to make the decision within their own borders and within their confines and their responsibilities and their authorities as municipal leaders to be able to require, within reason, that new buildings and major construction are all electric. So I appreciate all of your time. I wish you all well and Happy New Year. Stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you, Representative. Are there questions of Representative Gouveia? Hearing none, we want to thank you very much for testifying for us today. Are there additional members? Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Tammy. Are there additional members of the House who wish to testify before the House caucus begins? Hearing none, we will transition to members of the Senate, and I want to welcome Senator James Eldridge, Jamie Eldridge, to the House, and ask whether he wishes to testify at this time. His name is top of the list.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Chairman Barrett, Chairman Roy, and members of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utility, and Energy. And I really want to thank the chairs for having this hearing that's really very focused on not just banning additional fossil fuel infrastructure by the communities that have testified or the legislators that represent those communities, but also really the laser focus on the fact that the Baker-Polito administration has missed yet another deadline. We know that the opt-in stretch energy code, which was passed in the next generation roadmap law, which I want to thank you, Senator Barrett, and you, Representative Roy, for your leadership in getting that passed just last year, is that my understanding, and I know the two of you have made a statement on it, is I know that the at least draft code for that was due this fall, and yet it has not, last fall, so it has not come about. So I really hope that this hearing really lifts that up and really raises serious concerns about the Baker-Polito administration meeting its deadlines in the next generation roadmap law, and how helpful and important that stretch energy code is to helping communities across Massachusetts reduce their carbon emissions. And of course, because you have scheduled these home rule petitions, as well as statewide enabling legislation that I was very, very proud to file with Representative Tammy Gouveia, hoping that the committee will, also take further action, given that the administration has missed yet another deadline. And so the legislation I'm here to testify first is at the local level is Senate 2515, an act authorizing the town of Acton to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure in certain construction. I want to thank and note Representative Vitolo for noting that Brookline was the first community to pass a home rule petition after the Attorney General ruled that legislative action was required and that communities couldn't take action on their own, and all the communities that have filed since. And I will say, being from Acton, very proud that Acton has not only passed at town meeting a climate emergency resolution, but has taken a number of steps that are really looking to say, look, the next generation roadmap law passed. There are various deadlines. Every community needs to step up and reduce its carbon emissions. And this is yet another tool we need to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure. So I really want to praise leaders in Acton, including the Acton Climate Coalition and Green Acton. I believe they'll be testifying later today. And then to what Representative Gouveia said is that we have filed together Senate 1333 and House 2167, an act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by permitting local option all-electric buildings and home ordinances. So essentially, to the chairs and members of the committee, this is statewide local enabling legislation. So the hope is, and I know Representative Vitolo referenced this a bit, is the hope is that all these home rule petitions, whether this is part of a statewide bill or whether it's making tweaks to the home rule petitions, I really appreciate these communities stepping up to show leadership, and we wanted to show leadership in terms of statewide action as well, and that's why we filed this bill. So I would just close and say that I think we all know that carbon emissions are created. About 27% of statewide greenhouse gas emissions come from commercial and residential buildings, so that's significant. And I do think we need to go beyond the opt-in stretch energy code that's in the next generation roadmap law, and that's why, of course, you have all these bills before you. So I'm hoping we can take further action this session on a climate bill, and that these initiatives can be included in that bill through the committee's work. So thanks so much for taking me out of turn. And again, reading the press advisory for this hearing, really appreciate making the point that, again, the Baker-Polito administration has missed yet another deadline around draft regulation for the net stretch energy code, building code regulations, and continue to appreciate the committee holding the administration's feet to the fire on following and implementing the next generation roadmap law. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Eldridge. Are there questions of Senator Eldridge? I want to make a brief comment in the in the form of a question because I appreciate your focus on the importance of sticking to timelines. I'm now quoting from the Baker administration's Massachusetts 2030 Interim Clean Energy Plan, Senator Eldridge, which was released on, I believe, December 30th of 2020. The administration writes flatly in its Clean Energy Plan, quote, DOER will present a new high-performance stretch energy code to the Board of Building Regulation and Standards in 2021. So, to my knowledge, and I'd like you to confirm it if you think I'm correct, this is the first element in the Baker administration's own clean energy plan involving a deadline that it's failed to meet. It's a discouraging early sign of whether or not we're on track. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that, and it is very troubling. As the Senate Chair of the Clean Energy Caucus, we spent a fair amount of time, looking at the timelines, many of which you put into the law, and so if we're going to miss a deadline around a stretch energy code, again, that's opt-in, what's going to happen with the carbon emissions timeline deadlines coming up? So I agree.
Thank you, Senator, very much. Are there additional questions? Hearing none, we want to thank you, Jamie, for appearing before us.
Thank you.
We next have on our sign-up list Senator Cream, if Senator Cream is with us.
I am.
Welcome, Senator Cream.
Thank you. I've been here from the beginning, listening to my colleagues talk about same legislation I guess I filed. But thank you, Chair Barrett and Chair Roy. I'm here to testify in favor of Senate 2473, an act authorizing the town of Brookline to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure in certain construction. Again, I do want to emphasize that Brookline was ahead of the curve here and tried to do this for a while. And I echo the words of Rep. Patolo, who also spoke on behalf of this bill. The town of Brookline adopted a climate action plan calling for reducing greenhouse emissions to zero in 2050. That was their own plan. But as part of this strategy for reaching the goal, Brookline passed a law in 2019 that would have restricted fossil fuel hookups in new buildings and in substantial renovation projects. The bylaw included exceptions for stoves and other appliances, medical facilities regulated by the Department of Public Health, and other appropriate areas. Unfortunately, that law was unable to take effect because it was deemed to have conflicted with existing state law. Senate 2473 that you have today is the home rule petition, which would allow the 2019 bylaw to take effect, despite these conflicting state statutes. It would give Brookline the authority to amend the bylaws in the future so that the town can continue to fine-tune its approach in this evolving area of climate policy. Although Senate 2473 is a local home rule petition, it has implications for the entire Commonwealth. That's because Massachusetts will eventually have to require that all new buildings generate heat and hot water without relying on fossil fuels. Brookline and other communities are ready to take this step now. They want to run what you might consider a pilot project for the rest of Massachusetts. And the legislature, I see no reason for them to prevent them from doing so. Allowing these communities to act now would lead to a reduction in greenhouse gas emission. But just as important, it would build the market for an air source heat pumps and electric water heaters, increasing the size of the workforce trained in all electric construction and increase consumer awareness of electric options. That would make the transition to all electric construction far easier for the rest of the Commonwealth, which it embarks on while it embarks on that process. Senate 2473 would help Brookline, and I now hear other communities, achieve their emission reduction obligations. I respectfully request the committee give it a favorable report. I'm very proud of the work that this committee has done on both of you, Chair Roy and Chair Barrett. And as you know, I also chair a climate committee, and we are hoping that with our good work, we can push the state of Massachusetts along to where it really already should be. So thank you.
Senator Cream, thank you very much. Are there questions of our colleague? Hearing none, we'll release you to your other duties, but appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
We now want to hear from Senator Cindy Friedman. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you and Chairman Roy. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am here to testify once again on the bills before you, H3893 and H3750, both of which are two home rule petitions related to what you've been hearing about, the adoption and enforcing local regulations restricting the use of fossil fuels in certain construction. And this is in the towns of Arlington and the towns of Lexington. I know you have a lot before you, so I don't want to go into a whole explanation that you have already heard from people, but I just want to reiterate what you've heard from my colleagues. And I want to say now is the time. You said it, Mr. Chair. The administration is far behind what they're supposed to be doing. And given their actions, it's becoming more and more doubtful that we're going to see something that's as explicit or as far-reaching as what our communities are simply asking. Let's not have any more fossil fuel hookups with certain conditions. And I also want to say that having these home rule petitions and if and when the state actually puts out the regulations are not mutually exclusive. Both of those things can happen. And I would bet a lot of money that if the state regulations turn out to be more stringent and get us to net zero faster, that these communities are going to opt in to those new requirements. So I believe that now is the time that we need to support our communities, that this is a huge and ongoing crisis, as you are always telling us, and I agree, and we can't stop progress. So please, let's get these home rule petitions, Arlington, Lexington, Brookline, Acton, Concord, sorry if I missed anybody. Let's support these communities and let's get moving to reach our goals. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Are there questions of Senator Friedman? Hearing none, we want to thank you very much for making time in your busy day for joining us.
Thank you.
Are there additional members of the Massachusetts State Senate who would like to testify? Hearing none, and I presume that there are no additional members of the House who have shown up in the interim who would like to testify, we will transition to our first panel today, which is Matthew Johnson and Amanda Cohen, both from my district in the town of Concord. Are Matt and Amanda with us?
Yes, I'm here. This is Matt Johnson, member of the Select Board for the town of Concord.
Glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Chair Barrett and Chair Roy and the members of the committee. I'm joined today by our Sustainability Director, Amanda Cohen, and we've come to urge your support of H4117, which is an act authorizing the town of Concord to adopt and enforce local regulations that restrict fossil fuel infrastructure in certain construction. So at the 2017 town meeting of Concord, by a declared near unanimous vote, our citizens committed to deliver 100% green power through our municipal light plant by 2030. And they also funded the development of a climate action and resilience plan that lays out our detailed roadmap to achieve an 80% reduction in the town's greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Since then, we've made great progress in securing carbon-free power. In fact, over half of it today comes from carbon-free sources. And that's motivated electric vehicle purchases. And we also have ensured that our future municipal projects, such as our new middle school project, are going to be net zero. However, since 60% of Concord's GSG emissions come from the built environment, far more than what Jamie Eldridge quoted for the statewide average of 27%, we in Concord can't meet our sustainability goals if commercial and residential developers continue to build buildings the way that they used to. And I was a former member of Concord's planning board, where I worked with fellow board members to encourage all electric construction and granting special permits and conducting site plan reviews. But not having the authority to mandate fossil fuel-free construction, our efforts have had little impact. The result is 30 to 50 years of greenhouse gas production when we could have had none. So given the mismatch between our town goals and the conventional development practices that take place in our environment, it's no wonder that Concord has called for fossil fuel-free infrastructure in most new development and passed that nearly unanimously at our 2021 town meeting. But at this point, we really need that home rule authority to implement it. So I urge your support of H 4117.
I will just note, by the way, that you're also recorded here as interested in supporting the statewide approach of Senator Eldridge and Representative Gouveia.
Yes, and Amanda Cohen will speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Amanda.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Chair Barrett and Chair Roy and members of the committee for having us here today. I'm Amanda Cohen, the Sustainability Director for the Town of Concord, and I'm speaking on behalf of Town Manager Carrie LaFleur, who is submitting her written testimony, and many other Concord residents that have approved the home rule petition that is in front of you today and the associated bylaw. We urge you to support, at a minimum, H 4117, an act authorizing the Town of Concord to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure in certain construction. However, we also recognize that all communities should be able to do their part to address the climate crisis, and action will be needed across the state. Therefore, we also urge you to support Senator Eldridge and Representative Gouveia's bill, H 2167 and S 1333, which would give all municipalities the option of requiring all electric buildings. As Mr. Johnston relayed, Concord has a long history of progressive action to address sustainability and climate resilience. And in alignment with our carbon reduction goals, our Climate Action and Resilience Plan, and the Massachusetts 2050 Decarbonization Roadmap, we ask that you let innovative municipalities, such as Concord, be Massachusetts' test kitchen for this type of climate action. Without further action, Concord will fall short of our community's goals, even with carbon-free electricity supply and assuming Concord residents and businesses consume the same type of energy at the same rate as they did in 2019. Emissions will only drop 32%. The time to act is now. Any new construction will be in operation for decades to come and will either continue to contribute to the climate crisis or need deep energy retrofits in the short term. We urge you to advance the aforementioned bills to support both local and state climate goals. And thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Are there questions of Ms. Cohen or Mr. Johnson? We want to thank Concord for its forward-looking action and for its leadership. Thank you very much.
Chair Barrett.
Thank you, Matt. We'll go on to our next panel, if it's okay. Here we have folks from the town of Arlington. Town Manager Adam Chamberlain, I believe, will be with us. Coralie Cooper and Patrick Hannon, both members of clean energy organizations in Arlington, will join the town manager. Adam, Coralie, Patrick, are you with us?
Yes, sir. Yep, we're here, Senator.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Well, please give us your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. And thank you to Chair Barrett and Chair Roy for hosting this, and to the whole committee for being here to listen to this testimony today. As Arlington's town manager, I really appreciate this opportunity to submit testimony before this joint committee. In November of 2020, Arlington Town Meeting passed a warrant article by a vote of 225 to 18. And this vote provided approval for the Select Board to petition the General Court to enact special legislation that would authorize the town to adopt and enforce local regulations restricting fossil fuel infrastructure in new building construction and major renovation projects. Passage of this article came after broad community outreach and with our select board's unanimous support. According to our most recent 2017 greenhouse gas inventory, approximately 60% of carbon emissions in Arlington come from buildings, much like some of the prior speakers acknowledged. Arlington has already taken steps to decarbonize some of our buildings. The town's new high school will be heated and cooled solely with air source heat pumps, and much of the power for those pumps will be generated by on-site solar with battery backup. Also, the town's new Department of Public Works facility will be heated and cooled almost exclusively by air source heat pumps. In January of 2018, Arlington's Select Board committed the town to reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. In July of that same year, the board established a Clean Energy Future Committee to help guide the town toward achieving the 2050 commitment. That committee released a net zero action plan last February with 31 specific measures designed to achieve Arlington's goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions. This plan calls for the transition of all municipal, residential, and commercial buildings to net zero emissions by 2050. These recent actions are consistent with the town's prior leadership on energy and climate issues. All the way back to 2003, town meeting overwhelmingly approved a requirement that all municipal building construction achieve LEED Silver certification. Additionally, Arlington became one of the first green communities in the Commonwealth in 2010. In 2015, we installed 584 kilowatts of solar energy on 6 school buildings, and soon we'll be installing more than a megawatt of additional rooftop and ground-mounted solar at both our new high school and new public works facility. In 2017, we launched our Arlington Community Electricity Green Municipal Aggregation Program. In 2019, we ran a popular Heat Smart campaign, resulting in more heat pump installations than any Heat Smart campaign in the whole Commonwealth. And most recently, this past June, Arlington Town Meeting passed a climate emergency warrant article by a vote of 172 to 13, calling on the town to accelerate our efforts to transition to zero greenhouse gas emissions. Favorable action on House 3750 will allow Arlington to build on the energy and climate steps that we have already taken and bring us closer to meeting our goals. We won't be able to meet our goals, our 2050 commitment, if we cannot regulate the use of fossil fuels in new construction and major renovations. I'm also very aware of the other vehicles that are currently being discussed for regulating the use of fossil fuels. The roadmap legislation, which has been discussed earlier with the leadership of this committee, required DOER to promulgate an opt-in specialized stretch code aimed at achieving the state's own net zero goals. The legislation became effective after 90 days in June of 21, and yet no hearings have been held, no language has been drafted, and no schedule has been established for meeting the statutory mandate that the code be finished by next December. Moreover, I'm deeply concerned that when the stretch code is promulgated, it will fall far short of meeting the challenges before us. On November 29th of 2021, 30 municipalities, including Arlington, sent a letter to Secretary Theo Herides stressing the importance of a strong stretch code. I'd also like to note that bills being heard today, sponsored by Senator Eldridge and Representative Gouveia, would create a path for cities and towns that have not yet submitted home rule petitions to regulate the use of fossil fuels in new construction and major renovations. While I'm not in a position to comment on the details of those bills, they are certainly welcome. We and the other towns before the committee are ready to move forward, and we should be allowed to do so. But others who wish to follow in our footsteps should have a better procedure than seeking special legislation in each case through a home rule petition. So today, I really appreciate this opportunity to convey my enthusiastic support for the passage of House 3750, and I respectfully request that the members of this committee vote to approve moving this bill out of the committee with a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll hear from your colleagues on the panel. So we've got Coralie Cooper, if Coralie's with us.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Barrett and Roy and members of the committee. As the chair of Arlington's Clean Energy Future Committee, or CEFC, I thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House 3750. As Adam Chamberlain stated in his testimony, the town of Arlington's Clean Energy Future Committee released its Net Zero Action Plan in 2021. The plan was developed by the town and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and involved extensive consultation with residents, businesses, town meeting members, and others. This year, the CEFC turned to the task of implementing the Net Zero Action Plan. And because buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gas pollution in the town, a majority of the 31 actions in the plan address building-related greenhouse gases. There are approximately 12,000 buildings in Arlington, and reaching the town's net zero goals requires that on average, slightly more than one building is converted every day into a zero-emission building. That's more than 400 buildings a year for 30 years. To meet this enormous challenge, the plan sets out measures such as changing zoning that hinder the construction of net zero buildings, updating bylaws on municipal buildings, providing technical support to the community, and a suite of other actions. The goal is for all Arlington buildings to be 100% electric. Arlington's Net Zero Action Plan found the cost of building a new energy-efficient, all-electric, single-family home is comparable to the cost of building a home heated with natural gas, and lifetime operating costs to the owner can be lower. Timing is of the essence to implement the measures in the Net Zero Action Plan. An essential element is to ensure that new building construction achieve the highest possible emissions reductions. These buildings may not undergo significant rebuilding for 50 to 100 years. So every new building that's constructed with fossil fuel systems will lock in greenhouse gases for decades. In addition, the average home heating system will be replaced once or twice over the next 30 years, meaning there will be up to 2 chances to convert the heating system to a zero-emission technology. So eliminating emissions from new buildings and those undergoing major renovations are essential elements to decarbonizing Arlington buildings. And this can only be done if the town has the authority to regulate fossil fuel use in new buildings and those undergoing major renovations. Climate scientists have projected that if we can keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, the worst impacts of climate change, like extreme floods and wildfires, can be avoided. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change concluded that to give ourselves a chance to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius worldwide, we'll need to reduce greenhouse gas pollution 45% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. To achieve these goals, action at every level of government is needed. Without the passage of House 3750, Arlington will not be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from new buildings or those undergoing major renovation and meet its net zero energy goals. So Arlington really needs House 3750 to get us closer to meeting our climate goals. I appreciate the opportunity to express my strong support for passage of H 3750, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you very much, Coralie. And we're going to, before we ask questions, we're going to move on to the third member of your panel, Mr. Patrick Hanlon.
Thank you, Chairman Barrett. I can hardly express how exciting it was in 2019 when Arlington first became aware of and began working with Brookline on taking their home rule petition, or what was then just the bylaw for regulating fossil fuel hookups to Arlington. We had the privilege of being second, but it's a second in a long parade. There are three other towns before you today. This is happening in other communities, and it's really more of a movement, actually, than something that is individual. Although, as the committee has heard, every town that has adopted this has adopted it as one element in an aggressive plan to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 or even earlier, and they need your help to keep going. And I think other towns need the help that would be provided by the Gouveia and Eldridge bills to do this without coming and asking you each time when they want to take another step forward. I want to focus at this point on the elephant in the room, although many others have noticed it. From the beginning, the home rule petitions have been subject to concern on the ground that they involve important matters of policy that should be addressed at the state level. And we're all completely aware of the roadmap legislation that required the establishment of a net zero stretch code by next December. That bill was enacted in March. It went effective in June. So far, nothing has happened. And I've had the privilege of being Arlington's representative of the various groups that have been following the stretch code. And it's been like waiting for Godot. Every month there's a new rumor that something is going to happen, and every month nothing actually happens. There's obviously a tremendous concern that we'll miss the deadlines, because missing the deadlines may very well mean that town meetings will not be able to have the opportunity to adhere to the stretch code when it's adopted in the normal schedule. But beyond that, there's a great deal of concern that this delay is simply a sign of a degree of uncertainty as to how far to go and what the administration can get away with in its attempt to comply with the roadmap legislation. Arlington was a leader in obtaining the consent of some 29 other municipalities in the letter that was sent, that Mr. Chamberlain mentioned, that was sent to the secretary, and it stressed that you really absolutely have to have a strong stretch code. That letter included a list of items that our town thought that needed to be concluded. It needed to be a real net zero stretch code. Its provisions altogether should be aimed at an energy efficient all electric building that achieves carbon neutrality through the production or purchase of energy.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hannon, that's our 3-minute timer. Why don't you?
Okay, I'm sorry. So we need to go forward. We need to have this fossil fuel ban has to be an essential part of any stretch code, and this committee could send a great message to the administration and boost the activity all along by a favorable recommendation on the home rule petitions and also on the more comprehensive legislation that Senator Eldridge and Representative Gouveia have proposed.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions of our panel? I have a couple of short ones. First of all, just as a point of information, both you and Adam Heptelaine mentioned next December. By next December, of course, you mean December of this year.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. December of 2022. Just a point of clarification there. I was impressed with Ms. Cooper's mention that as long as we focus on new construction and gut rehabs, we can install non-fossil fuel heating at a price point competitive with any other heating system we might install. In this respect, I want to quote from the one comprehensive study I know of Massachusetts buildings that have already been built to be net zero. This is a study entitled "Massachusetts is Ready for Net Zero." It was put out by an organization called Built Environment Plus last year in 2021. I'm quoting from a passage there. Out of 7 million plus square feet of net zero ready construction in Massachusetts so far, 85% of projects reported less than a 1% increase in construction costs. That's less than 1% over a baseline of fossil fuel heated construction. So if the cost differential when you're building fresh is so small, why are the builders of Massachusetts constantly putting out the refrain that construction of net zero buildings will add significantly to the total cost of homes in Massachusetts? What's going on there? Why the disinformation, or at least the disconnect in these 2 points of view?
I'll take a crack at that. I mean, I think that change is a difficult process, and also that the industry is not necessarily in the business of providing a public good such as clean air and very low greenhouse gas emitting products, and so they really need to be required to do that. So even if the cost effectiveness numbers are there, the change affecting that change, it's just difficult to change the industry.
Yeah, I want to quote one other report. This from the city of Boston. So this is the government, which has to be in the business of building affordable housing. The city of Boston issued a $30 million RFP in 2020 for affordable housing, and the RFP indicated that it will only accept responses funding developments that meet zero emission performance standards. And I quote from the RFP, zero emission requirements are an urgent and crucial step toward reducing the huge carbon impact of Boston's built environment. So now we have an entity very much involved with the financing of new housing, saying that this can be done at a price point that supports affordable housing. So again, it's just a thought question. I'm wondering why the builders and developers are putting out a message that is so much at variance with the city of Boston's message, when the city of Boston on this one is very much an on-the-ground actor. Again, just worth thinking about. Yeah. Yes.
I would just add to really underscore your point. We just cut the ribbon on two separate but part of one project, all affordable housing units through the Housing Corporation of Arlington. I think the total is 52 units, all built with air source heat pumps. So all fully electric buildings. And I think anybody on this call familiar with CDCs and the construction of affordable housing knows they do it on very tight budgets, right? They're not spending extra money, in the construction of those units. They're doing what's most economical. And they found through that project, a multi-million dollar project, the air source heat pumps to be the most economical. So I think that's it's anecdotal, but yet a key data point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Are there additional questions of our panel? Hearing none, we want to thank all of you for making the effort, for making the trek to join this committee. I know many of you had to walk, to the next room. So we appreciate the effort. Thank you. And we're now going to move on to hearing from the town of Brookline. We have Mel Kleckner, Lisa Cunningham, Jesse Gray, Steve Heiken, and Paul Sainer, if they're with us and could begin their testimony at this time.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, good morning. My name is Mel Kleckner. I'm the town administrator of the town of Brookline. And the home rule bill that you are considering today has been supported by the select board and approved by our representative town meeting. And this bill, as you've heard, would create legislative authority for a local bylaw that currently conflicts with state laws as determined by the Attorney General when our prior zoning bylaw was passed. The town of Brookline takes seriously its role in reducing reducing greenhouse gas emissions with a goal of net zero by 2040. This goal requires action to achieve. Action to reduce the causes of greenhouse gas, including heating and cooling in our buildings. The Brookline bylaw would restrict fossil fuel construction in new and fully renovated buildings and create waivers for certain uses. We believe this requirement can be integrated into the planning and funding of new or major construction using technologies that are becoming commonplace. That is what the town of Brookline and many other communities and institutions are doing now for their own building infrastructure, including all of the new public schools being constructed in Brookline being entirely fossil fuel free. We can appreciate future action on statewide stretch codes to meet sustainability goals, but meanwhile, some towns are ready for action now, and that includes Brookline. Local governments often lead the way with innovation in providing public services and in regulating private activity to meet public policy goals. This experimentation is essential to developing the data and considering the impacts for statewide or national approaches. Brookline has been a particular leader in the Commonwealth by adopting local bylaws, regulations, or filing home rule bills that have eventually become part of state law or best practices adopted by other municipalities. We believe our success with these initiatives and the demonstrated ability of the town of Brookline to manage these regulations compel the legislature to support Brookline and other municipalities you've heard today to manage these regulations and to advance the ball on climate action. By doing so, the Commonwealth will be able to assess the costs and other impacts of this policy as it considers statewide action to meet our shared goals or greenhouse gas emissions. The time is act is now. Thank you very much for your consideration. You'll hear now from other members of our panel.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Paul Senator.
Why don't we hear from Lisa Cunningham, if Lisa's in the house?
Thanks, Senator Barrett. We're going to go, if that's all right with you, we're going to go with Paul Sainer, then Steve Heiken, then Jesse Gray, and then myself.
Terrific.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the distinguished members of the Joint Committee, and it's great to see you, Chair Barrett. My name is Paul Sainer. I co-chair Brookline's Economic Development Advisory Board, and professionally, beyond serving as Commissioner for the Blind in the Commonwealth, I, for many years, was involved in real estate investments and finance at the national level. Brookline's 2019 groundbreaking all-electric legislation was a crash course introduction to me and many others on the feasibility of new development without adding additional fossil fuel infrastructure. The Economic Development Advisory Board consists of developers, architects, planners, and other real estate professionals. And we were very skeptical initially, but then were part of the team that smashed the stereotype. And that was only possible as a result of a very collaborative, nuanced, and in some cases intensive debate and learning opportunity that led to all boards and commissions in Brookline supporting the 2019 bylaw that was nearly unanimously passed by town meeting, 98% plus. That has set up very nicely opportunities for other legislative changes. So how has the market responded? The proof is in the pudding. In Brookline, over the last 3 years, 7 Chapter 40B developments have either been built or permitted with all-electric HVAC heating systems, and in many cases, exceeding the stretch code. Those comprise nearly 500 units, more than 100 of which are affordable. The governor's continued concerns over all-electric impacting housing production is completely unfounded. I want to share one other example. In 2019, Welltower, the nation's largest owner of senior living, approached the town about a development opportunity, and in the first meeting, immediately agreed to develop that project on an all-electric basis. That was Welltower's first such development. We negotiated many, many other things with Welltower that involved money. Never once did they bring up any incremental cost or burden as a result of their commitment. That $100 million plus development is now under construction. The local action has made it possible for us to move much closer to our mutual goal of net zero. And the reality is that, in my opinion, all real estate asset types other than labs, which have significant peak energy uses, can be all electric. Labs still need a hybrid system approach. So in closing, I would urge the Joint Committee to push back on uninformed real estate interests and unanimously support the suite of home rule petitions before the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Why don't we hear from the colleague next on the panel?
Thank you, Senator Barrett and members of the committee. My name is Steve Heiken, and I am the chair of the Brookline Planning Board, a member of the Brookline Housing Advisory Board, and an architect and planner with 40 years of experience in the planning and design of multifamily housing. And I wanted to speak from my experience from those various positions in support of Brookline's home rule petition, as well as the statewide implementation of movements to allow fossil fuel-free development to be regulated and promoted. At the planning board, we have seen a significant number of projects that come to us voluntarily proposing to utilize fossil fuel-free HVAC systems, meaning that the developers, the builders, the lawyers that represent them, and their clients all are moving in this direction voluntarily. The same is true of individual homeowners who are either building a new home, single-family home, or renovating or expanding an existing home. So a significant proportion of members of the real estate development community already get this. When projects come to us where they are not already proposing to do this, we generally recommend that they look at it and often get a favorable reaction, but we don't have the power to require this. In my seat on the Housing Advisory Board, we work closely with the Brookline Housing Authority, which is in the process of redeveloping their half-dozen federally funded family and senior housing projects, and they also voluntarily are utilizing fossil fuel-free HVAC systems, not only in their new construction, but in the projects which they are renovating. And finally, from my years of experience as an architect and being in touch with the firm that I co-founded 4 years ago, Icon Architecture, their recent and current projects are substantially all utilizing fossil fuel-free HVAC systems, so that, again, as others have said, a significant proportion of the real estate development industry is already on board with this. Those that aren't really suffer from either a lack of motivation to change or a lack of education. And I think that adopting the home rule petitions and or the statewide bill will really get us over the hump and on the road to a fossil fuel-free future. Thank you very much, and I will turn it over to Jesse Gray.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Gray, and I drafted and filed Brookline's 2019 all-electric bylaw, passed overwhelmingly by town meeting. I'm a co-founder of Zero Carbon MA, which is leveraging local will to accelerate progress to net zero. Climate activism is how I give back, but I'm also a neurogenomicist and a father of 3 boys. And I want to ask you to let us clean our rooms. But first, thank you to the chairs, the entire committee, and especially Chair Barrett and Representative Vitolo. Now, we know from the science that we need to get to zero emissions by roughly 2040, and that includes converting all of the oil and gas buildings in the state to all electric in a mere 18 years. Unfortunately, the policies being proposed at the federal, state, and local level fall far short of achieving this goal. Even the most aggressive policies being put forward in the most liberal cities of the bluest states won't get us close to this goal. One of the biggest barriers is an unfortunate mismatch of political will and legal authority. The will to address this problem is strongest at the local level, in places like Brookline, but the authority resides at the state level. This problem is crystallized by the AG's disallowal of our 2019 bylaw and our consequent inability to prevent unnecessary and wasteful installation of fossil fuel infrastructure in major construction in Brookline. The AG made the legal determination that our 2019 bylaw was, as the lawyers say, repugnant to law because it conflicts with state statute. Well, I think the statutes that are blocking us are pretty repugnant. It's as if my son's room had a rank smell emanating from it, but I declined to allow him to clean it up. He could be forgiven in that instance for calling me repugnant. The good news is that it's easier to allow something than to require something. It's the difference between being told to clean your room and being allowed to clean your room. And by the way, there may actually be a rank smell emanating from my son's room. At the state level, meaningful climate policies, though, are very hard for you to pass and to get promulgated, for example, with an instrument as unwieldy as the state codes. But when the same exact policies are formulated as simple delegations of authority to municipalities, they become far easier. That is why passing bills like this Brookline Home Rule petition, as well as the statewide local enabling legislation, should enable the Commonwealth to dramatically accelerate climate progress. It's how we can get it actually done. Really, you should actually require all of us to clean our rooms with statewide prohibition of new fossil fuel infrastructure. But when is this body, or any state body for that matter, going to muster the political will to do that? In the meantime, you can allow us to get to work cleaning our own rooms immediately by passing these bills now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now we want to hear, I believe, from Lisa Cunningham.
Good morning, Senator Barrett, Representative Roy, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on Brookline's home rule petition and the other bills before you today. My name is Lisa Cunningham, and I am a town meeting member in Brookline and one of the co-petitioners of S2473. I'm also a co-founder of the Massachusetts Building Electrification Accelerator Program in partnership with RMI, a group of over 25 leading towns and cities, including all the towns and cities represented here today, working to advance building electrification policies which are so urgently needed to address our climate crisis. Professionally, I am an architect whose practice has been based in Brookline for the past 30 years, where I grew up, raised my children, and now have 2 grandchildren. Continuing to allow the building of new or major renovation projects with fossil fuel infrastructure is not just morally irresponsible. It is reckless fiscal policy, as well as an environmental justice and equity issues that is putting middle and lower income residents in our town at significant risk and harm. As my colleagues have pointed out, the governor is misinformed in thinking that all electric requirements will stop in its track any housing development. Brookline has shown that that idea couldn't be farther from the truth and reflects specious arguments taken directly from the fossil fuel lobby. Our gas infrastructure poses a significant safety and health risk, not just in our exploding pipelines and dying trees, all of which unfortunately have ample experience with in Brookline. Gas stoves, boilers, and other appliances emit dangerous pollutants such as formaldehyde and nitrous oxide and create harmful indoor air quality, which would not be allowed under the Clean Air Act. Children in homes with gas stoves faced a demonstrated 40% increase of asthma. That's 40%. Poor outdoor air quality from the burning of fossil fuels also causes many harmful health outcomes, resulting in higher rates of disease and mortality, while significantly raising the cost of our health care. Yet we continue to allow and even incentivize people to install gas leaks in their own homes. But why is it that my informed clients are able to build the right way in Brookline, while many of our low and middle income residents and other residents in business at the behest of uninformed or unscrupulous developers, builders, and architects are not afforded the same advantage of clean homes and healthy living and working conditions? Why do we insist on continuing to allow the installation of fossil fuel systems that are designed to last at least 30 years, even when we know with absolute certainty that these systems will need to be ripped out decades sooner than their expected lifetime at far greater cost and just as great inconvenience and liability to these unsuspecting property owners? As we continue to waste precious time from one state agency or another to come up with what will undoubtedly be inadequate plans to address our climate crisis or to adequately meet even the most tepid of climate goals, our climate crisis continues to accelerate, increasingly reaching tipping points that are unrecoverable. Today, we implore you to let us do the right thing for the citizens of Brookline and the citizens of the Commonwealth, something that we have demonstrated again and again as a town that we have the will and means to do. My children are severely worried about the life that awaits their children. I'm wrapping up right now. And that, as a mother, that is heartbreaking, I can tell you, to hear. Heartbreaking. I fear for all of our futures, and particularly for our most vulnerable residents. Our house is on fire. Please stop this madness and allow us to start putting that fire out.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cunningham. Are there questions of our panel? I have one, and it has to do with harmonization. The local home rule petitions before us today in several cases, including Brookline's, provide for certain exceptions, and I'm quoting from the Brookline bill, This chapter shall apply to all building permit applications for new buildings and major renovations, except that this chapter shall not apply to, and among the exceptions are, life science buildings, research laboratories for scientific or medical research, or medical offices regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Health as a healthcare facility. There are several other exceptions: indoor, outdoor cooking appliances, stoves, basically. I'm not quarreling with the rationale for the exception. My question to you is that two of the home rule petitions before us today, Concord's and Acton's, don't contain any of those exceptions. So we're dealing with, I think, two home rule bills that are 1.5 pages long, and we're dealing with 3 home rule bills that are 6.5 pages long with a significant number of exceptions. It seems as if some harmonization is in order here so that we could come out with a model that could be consistent. Do you agree that we ought to take the wisdom of all these bills, but harmonize them in some fashion?
Yes. I mean,
by the way, in what direction would harmonization go? I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, that's all right. Jesse, why don't you start, and I can wrap up if you miss anything.
Okay. Yeah, so I think part of the magic of delegating some authority here is that, communities are very motivated to make sure that they can have laboratories, for example, coming to them. So I don't think we need to worry about protecting communities' ability to recruit laboratories. If we broadly delegate the authority to impose these kinds of regulations, every community would be free to constrain it in the way that they wish. And if I'm not mistaken, the Brookline Home Rule petition actually asks for a broader authority as well, as asking for the thing that we already passed to actually become law.
And I just want to add, thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Senator Barrett, for your great question. I really appreciate it. If what you were getting at is could these towns get together and come up with a unified approach, I'm sure that could be the answer. I do want to point out that Brookline was the first to lead. So it was groundbreaking at that point. Now, as others have pointed out, not only are the 5 towns before you today leading, but we have a number of cities and towns in the pipeline to do the same. So if it would make it easier for you to pass these bills, we would be happy to get together and come up with a unified approach. I don't think that would be very difficult. The important thing is that we get this into law, that we are allowed to, as Jesse said, clean our rooms.
Yeah, that's a striking metaphor. I want to thank you all for offering it up. I just as a point of information, the Brookline ordinance does not give Brookline the authority to extend its regulatory reach to these exempted areas. So it is a blanket exemption for life sciences building and buildings for research and medical research or medical offices, not an exemption that Brookline can impose if it wishes, but withhold if it wishes. Just reinforces the point that we need apparently to think about harmonizing.
And before Steve speaks, I do want to just point out, number one, we're going to be our Building Electrification Accelerator Program is sponsoring a labs workshop tomorrow. And also that, again, when we wrote this in Brookline, we wrote that with the realization that every lab project in Brookline will have to go to town meeting for approval. And so we gave a broad exemption, knowing that we could hold laboratory buildings specifically to hold them accountable at town meeting. That's not true of every town and city, but that is true of Brookline. And thanks. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to make the same point that Lisa just did, that there are a couple of potential lab projects coming forward in Brookline, and because they will need special permits and maybe even zoning variances, we will be able to negotiate with those developers to do fossil fuel-free labs. Also, when we promulgated our original bylaw and the home rule petition a couple of years ago, we were still on the cutting edge of the technology that would allow laboratories, which use a much more intensive HVAC systems than typical commercial development, So we were a little bit reluctant to impose that at that point, but I think we've come a long way since then, and it's even within laboratories becoming standard for development to be fossil fuel free. So thank you.
Thank you very much. This is another comment in the form, I hope, of a question. Sometimes home rule bills come with the explicit stipulation that they cannot be changed by the legislature without going back to the town for additional consideration and approval. My quick read of several of these home rule petitions, and I don't pretend to have made an exhaustive reading on this particular point of all 5, suggests that that prohibition is not present and that the legislature would be free, within reason, to fine-tune any particular home rule bill among the bunch. Is that your understanding with respect to the Brookline language?
Yes, that is our understanding. Thanks to our rep, Tommy Vitolo, for his guidance on this. And correct, that is our understanding as well.
Are there additional questions of this panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Pacheco has joined us. I don't see him quite yet, but welcome, Senator. I believe it's his voice, Senator Pacheco.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Roy, and to members of the committee. I just wanted to thank all of these communities that have put forth these initiatives. And as Jesse said earlier in the testimony, it's something that requires the political will. And at the state level, we need to actually exercise that political will. Because it can be done and is being done, as your local government's approving every day, that we can put up buildings and even have a very successful conversions of existing parts of the built environment with the new technologies that are out there. We just have to get about the business of getting it done. And this executive branch has to get about the business of making sure they promulgate the rules and regulations to get it done. And if they are not getting it done, I, for one, as a member of this committee, have no problem with working with the chairs and other members of the committee to come up with some language here that allows you to go forward and be the laboratories of democracy for the municipal level, to give us some of the standards and proof where we can actually point to projects that have been done, when we look at the trades, for example, that are out there and other types of things that are happening with a lot of the contractors, they just simply have relationships in the business that they're used to doing. And if they understand the rules of the game have changed, those relationships will change or be expanded. So I thank you very much for your leadership. I think it's exciting looking at it from somebody who had a local government hat on many years ago. This is where a lot of the changes take place and will need to take place. But Jesse, thank you for utilizing that statement of political will. It's great to see that you have the political will at the local level. We at the state level, even though we've done so much comparatively with others, when you compare with other states, we still are, as you said, Jesse, woefully short in terms of actions that we need to take to actually meet our net zero by 2050 requirement. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there additional questions of our panel? I just want to make an observation inspired by Senator Pacheco's comment about I think that the workforce, organized labor. I was saddened to see that one of the two organizations cited in the governor's original veto letter of this legislation was the Massachusetts State Building Trades Council. They supported vetoing language, and they singled out the Stretch Energy Code as the reason for their opposing the legislature and siding with the governor. So I just want to express my devout hope that the building trades, the organized building trades, evolve in the direction that Senator Pacheco suggests, because as of the time of the governor's original veto, they had not evolved. So I just want to go on to the next panel, and that is from the town of Lexington. We have, and you guys choose the order, but we have Mark Sandine, Sean Dugan, Cindy Ahrens, Ricky Papo, and Mary Hutton, I believe. And we welcome the group of Lexingtonians at this time.
Well, thank you, Senator Barrett and Senator Roy, for the opportunity to testify. My name's Mark Sandine. I'm a Lexington Select Board member and previously chair of the Sustainable Lexington Committee. I'm speaking on behalf of the entire Select Board who voted unanimously in support of H 3893. On March 22nd, 2021, town meeting voted 175-7 with 96% support to petition the legislature for authority to adopt regulations restricting fossil fuel use in new construction. So let me tell you the story about how Lexington got to this point. In 2010, we were one of the first 5 communities to adopt the Stretch Energy Code. In 2013, town meeting asked Lexington to consider climate change in all decisions and planning processes and to develop a comprehensive climate action plan. And that plan identified that Lexington's buildings are our #1 source of air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for 66% of all emissions in Lexington. In 2017, we launched our Community Choice Program, which delivers 110 million kilowatt hours of 100% renewable electricity to 10,000 customers each year, and we won the Commonwealth's Leading by Example Award for Sustainable Action. And in 2018, the Select Board adopted the Getting to Net Zero Emissions Plan to transition all residential, commercial, and municipal buildings to 100% renewable energy by 2043. With the support of local real estate agents and Lexington's largest commercial property owners. And in 2019, the Select Board and School Committee adopted a building policy requiring all new school and municipal buildings to be all electric. And we've since built 2 net zero schools with lower total life cycle costs than conventional buildings. And in 2020, spurred on by Lexington students' urgent call for action, town meeting declared a climate emergency by a vote of 159-1, calling for an end to townwide greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. And to have any chance of meeting these goals, all new construction projects must be designed with heat pumps and be powered with renewable electricity, starting today. There is no bigger emission reduction decision homeowners can make than designing new homes that will be able to operate on renewable energy, and no better time or more affordable time to make that decision than during design. New construction is the first step and the low-hanging fruit in this transition to a clean, healthy energy, renewable energy world. Governor Baker often mentions his experience as a Select Board member and his trust in local communities to innovate in solving the hardest problems this Commonwealth has faced. H 3893 will allow Lexington to innovate, to lead, to build on the steps we've already taken, paving the path for other communities to follow. H 3893 is critical to Lexington and the Commonwealth's ability to meet our emissions, resilience, health, and wellness goals. And the Town of Lexington Select Board respectfully requests the TUE committee vote to report H 3893 out favorably. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. The next panelist from Lexington.
Sean.
Good morning, Chair Barrett, Chair Roy, and members of the committee. My name is Sean Dugan, and I am the Town of Lexington's Public Information Officer, speaking on behalf of Lexington Town Manager Jim Malloy. Mr. Malloy appreciates the opportunity to submit this testimony before the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy regarding H 3893. The Town of Lexington has long been a leader in taking action to reduce building emissions. Most recently, in the spring of 2021, Lexington Town Meeting, after broad community outreach and with the Select Board's unanimous support, overwhelmingly passed Warrant Article 29. This warrant article provided approval for the Select Board to petition the Massachusetts General Court to enact special legislation that would authorize the town to adopt and adopt and enforce local regulations restricting fossil fuel infrastructure in new building construction and major renovation projects. The town manager also supports passage of this bill. Town staff have carefully reviewed the proposal bylaw in detail and are confident that it will be implemented professionally and consistently. Lexington is currently experiencing a building boom with hundreds of thousands of square feet of new construction being planned in the next couple of years. If those buildings are built to business as usual standards, the increased emissions from that new construction would eradicate all the emissions reduction progress the town has made over the last 15 years. Please provide the town with the tools we need to achieve our long-standing goals of making Lexington a truly sustainable community. H 3893 will allow Lexington to build on the steps we have already taken and bring us closer to meeting our emissions, resilience, health, and wellness goals. The Lexington Select Board and Town Manager appreciate the opportunity to convey our enthusiastic support for the passage of H 3893 and respectfully request that you and your committee members vote to approve moving this bill forward and out of committee. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the town manager's input there.
So I'm going to go next. Hi, my name is Cindy Ahrens. I'm a member of the Sustainable Lexington Committee, and we unanimously support H 3893 and appreciate the opportunity to submit the following testimony to your committee, Chairs Barrett and Roy. When Lexington's young citizens implored the town to take even more aggressive action to reduce our emissions, and town meeting overwhelmingly, as you heard, committed to doing so in its climate emergency declaration, the Sustainable Lexington Committee decided that one very important piece of that more aggressive action should be to stop installing systems that burn fossil fuels in new buildings as soon as possible. By passing 3893 and allowing Lexington to adopt and enforce local regulations on fossil fuel use in new buildings, Lexington will not only be more likely to meet its own emissions goals, but will honor the strong commitment it has made to its young people and indeed all of its citizens. The Sustainable Lexington Committee was heavily involved in the promotion of Warrant Article 29, which led to 3893. And during that time, it became increasingly clear that requiring new construction and major renovations to move to highly efficient electric-based space and water heating would not only reduce emissions, but as you already heard, would also cost essentially the same or even less, greatly reduce operating costs compared to oil and propane. By the way, half of all new homes in Lexington are built with propane. It's really, really expensive for homeowners. It would simplify operation and maintenance, increase the long-term value of a building, avoid future costs of retrofits, and very importantly, create better air quality for its building inhabitants. The Sustainable Lexington Committee asks that you and your committee members swiftly move 3893 forward out of your committee. And now very briefly, I'd like to speak on behalf of myself. It's been almost a year since the Next Gen Climate Bill was passed, and there's been no draft of a new stretch code proposal, much less any opportunity for public input or transparency. We rightly all have aggressive climate goals, but we also have the solutions to meet those goals looking us right in the face. We desperately need a net zero stretch energy code that includes the electrification of buildings. However, I don't have the confidence that this administration will produce one. We needed to take action yesterday for the sake of our children and grandchildren and for the sake of our most vulnerable communities. Please help the individual municipalities that are ready. Let them lead the way, unlocking innovation. Please help pass 3893 and the other home rules and House 2167. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm up next. I'm Ricky Papo. Thank you, Chair Barrett and Chair Roy, and the members of the TUE Committee for the opportunity to speak in enthusiastic support of H 3893. As Chair of LexCan, the Lexington Climate Action Network, an organization that Senator Barrett knows well, and an organization that has been working on climate change since 2005, and I'm a 9-year member of Lexington Town Meetings. I am here representing residents who are ready to take bold action. The Home Rule petition gives the town the ability to curtail the root of climate change, which is fossil fuel emissions. Last night, we hosted an event on oceans and climate change. And in that event, it was very clear that the Northeast is set to have the most drastic effects of climate change first, and that the only way to control this is to stop burning fossil fuels. As you've heard, our youth has crafted a climate emergency declaration that was adopted by our town meeting. We need H3893 to fulfill this promise to our youth and our citizens, and we need your committee's support in reaching this goal. The Next Generation Roadmap bill has promised to develop a dramatically improved stretch energy code that would allow us to reach our net zero goals, but the administration has yet to deliver on this commitment. I look forward to when the state presents and implements a new stretch code, but I don't know what will be in that code and whether it will achieve the same.
Did we lose you, Ricky, or is that just me?
I can see that she's muted.
Ricky, you're muted.
Okay. Oh, that was.
Just, why don't you repeat your concluding statement there?
Well, my concluding, it wasn't exactly my concluding statement, but what I was talking about the Next Generation Roadmap bill, promising to develop. Did people hear this already? I don't want to review it. Okay. Lexington is ready now. And we are ready to address the destructive effects of climate change. These times, we need every tool available to us to prevent the worst effects of climate change. Home rule petitions, net zero energy codes, and we need Senate Bill 1333 and House Bill 2167. These are all pieces to a solutions-based approach to solving the climate crisis. LexCan is prepared to go right to work on Lexington's transition to a fossil this is hard to say, fossil fuel-free future. Please give Lexington the key to unlocking the ability to confront climate change. The climate science is clear, the daily news is alarming, and the only way to effectively address the climate crisis is to stop burning fossil fuels. H3893 is Lexington's opportunity to do just that, as well as all the other communities that have come before you with a home rule petition. Please support all of these home rule petitions and give us a positive outcome from the committee. I thank you for all your work for the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Ricky. I believe there may be we've got a
Mary Hutton.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Lexington chapter of Mothers Out Front in support of Lexington's home rule petition H3893. Mothers Out Front is a grassroots movement of mothers and others who are committed to creating a swift, just, and complete transition to a clean energy future for all our children, so that they can have a future. H3893 is a small but critical step toward reaching that goal. Why? Because it lets us take action now toward achieving our climate goals, and it's action, not words or promises, that are needed. And it's action on the municipal or local level that is especially important now, since it appears that action on the state level has been stalled. I would like to stop here and just thank the members of this committee for the hard work that you did last year to pass the Next Generation Roadmap bill, which was a truly groundbreaking piece of climate legislation. As has been mentioned, one of the important parts of that legislation was a directive to DOER to develop a specialized net zero stretch energy code. We were supposed to have seen a copy of the draft of that code last fall. Where is it? We are concerned that some months later, the draft code has yet to surface, and that when it ultimately does surface, it will bear no resemblance to a true net zero stretch energy code of the type that the supporters of the roadmap bill intended. I would also, as others have done, like to take time to express Mothers Out Front's support for Senate Bill 1333, House Bill H2167, which would allow all municipalities to limit the use of fossil fuel infrastructure in new construction. This is an important bill which should become law. However, our support is in addition to our full support for Lexington's home rule petition. Time is of the essence. Lexington is ready to act now, which is not the case with all municipalities. Allowing Lexington to be a test case will pave the way for other towns when they are ready to address the issue. And the importance of having the experience of other towns to draw from cannot be overestimated. When we first began our grassroots campaign for the passage of the Home Rule petition, one of the first questions almost everybody asked was, who else is doing this? Can you point to another town who has this? And when we would have to say, no, we would be among the first, it became a hurdle, something else we had to explain and overcome. So in summary, I urge you to vote H 3893 favorably out of committee, as well as the other Home Rule petitions. It is a small measure, which means a great deal to our town. Allowing Lexington to proceed in adopting this bylaw will only help inform other towns, indeed the state itself, on the effectiveness of this type of measure, thus leading to a uniform solution to the decarbonization of buildings. There is no downside, only upside to approving this measure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you all for your service to the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Mary. Are there questions of our panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have a few questions, but I want to begin by noting that both Chair Barrett and myself share your frustration with the lack of a stretch energy code. We have been discussing this for several weeks, and we decided to convene this hearing based on that. And we're hoping that the administration is paying attention to this hearing and hearing the concerns that are out there. And it is our sincere hope that this will get this process moving along. That being said, I do have a couple of questions for Mark Sundin. You had mentioned that you had done a study that showed that 66% of the emissions in Lexington were from housing. I'm curious, when you did the study, what were the other sources out there? And if a few years have gone by since that study, I'm wondering with some of your net zero buildings that if you've seen any improvement in your community.
Well, Chair Roy, those are all excellent questions. So we did our first baseline report in 2012, and Lexington is maybe an unusual community in that we have significant amount of commercial buildings in town. So it turns out about 2/3 of all of our electricity goes to commercial buildings in town, and about half of all the natural gas use in town goes to commercial buildings. So we have significant amount of commercial infrastructure in town. So that may be the difference why you're seeing a higher number for us than other communities. You asked about how we seen our emissions going down. The number one thing that we're seeing that is allowing our emissions to go down is by the adoption of our community choice program. That has been the biggest and number one most effective step forward. So we have moved something like 75% of all the kilowatt hours of our residential community over to our community choice program, and something like 17% of all of our commercial our commercial customers over to 100% renewable electricity. So that has resulted in something on the order of maybe 10% reduction in our overall emissions as the town. Our impact at a municipal level, we have now, with these 2 net zero schools and the solar energy systems that we've just put in place, we're now generating 64% of all the municipal energy used in town from solar energy systems. But the interesting thing is that when we build these big schools, 110,000 square foot school, that's 100% net zero. Our total emissions in Lexington from our schools and municipal buildings are 1% of our overall emissions. So when we move our municipality to 100% renewable energy, we're taking into account 1% of the task that we have going on. So that's the big goal. But yes, did I answer all your questions, Chair Roy?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. And I also note you have great representation as your senator in the town of Lexington. So congratulations on that as well.
Yes, he keeps us honest.
Are there additional questions, Mr. Chair, or other members of the committee? I do have one question, and it's arises as a result of the testimony of several of you. I'm thinking in particular of Cindy Ahrens, Ricky Papo, and Mary Hutton in this case, where the emphasis is on the ability of individual towns to be test kitchens. I want to ask you about the odd anti-innovation slant that comes out of the governor's original veto letter. For example, he has the following statement. He worries that the legislation's language relative to the stretch building code would result in a multitude of building codes across the Commonwealth, with the possibility of codes being changed mid-development. I was reading the New York Times this morning, and I couldn't help but contrast this anti-innovation slant, this lack of confidence in government, with a paragraph in an article that appears on the front business page of today's New York Times. It has to do with Amazon switching to electric vans for delivery. And Amazon's representative or overseer, executive in charge of its global fleet, said in a statement, quote, "The scale and speed at which we're trying to do this requires a lot of invention, testing, and learning, and a completely new playbook." So you have the private sector emphasizing invention, testing, and learning, and you have the governor of Massachusetts wringing his hands about the possibility that the number of stretch building codes in Massachusetts will increase from 2, the current number, all the way to 3. Why the anti-innovation spirit coming from a Republican administration that in ordinary circumstances would invite us to learn from the private sector's performance and orientation? Anyone care to comment on the lack of confidence the state government can innovate when the examples from the private sector would suggest that we should be testing, innovating, and learning?
Yes, thank you, Chair Barrett. It's an excellent question. I would not dare to guess what is going on in Governor Baker's head. But what I can speak to is there's something that Lexington has most recently done, you're aware of it, in terms of some innovation with life science and lab, very high energy intense use buildings, which was discussed a little bit before. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but I will talk about life science labs, right? These companies are on top of innovation, and thank goodness that they are, given the pandemic that we're in right now. But what was very clear about real estate developers that were building labs and life science buildings for clients like Moderna, Pfizer, these kinds of companies, the developers know that they need to innovate and they need to perform from a reducing emissions perspective for the facilities that they're providing, either that they're selling or leasing to these companies, because those companies are demanding it, because those employees of those companies are demanding it. And I can send you later, Senator, there was another recent article in the New York Times that talked about the investment industry in development and property development is demanding that, is pushing us to this innovation and in this direction. So I think that it's very clear that innovation is there and the solutions are there. As I mentioned before, the solutions are right there in our face. We just have to listen to it, because everybody's investors, property developers, innovative companies, and their employees are all asking for the same thing. So I couldn't tell you what the governor's thinking, because I think the path, the solutions are pretty clear.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Are there additional questions of our panel? We want to thank you very much for appearing before us today. We've got now Jim Snyder Grant, a member of the Acton Select Board, is next up if Jim is with us.
Sure am. How you doing, everybody?
Excellent.
It's been a great morning hearing all this testimony. I'm here about Senate 2515, our own Acton's Home Rule petition, and I think we've heard how similar all these petitions are, so I'm not going to get into the details. You'll be getting written testimony from our town manager and from our sustainability director with a lot of details. I just want to focus on persuading you that the home rule petition and similar measures from the other towns are needed now, no matter what statewide legislation or regulations eventually passed. So I'm going to offer 4 reasons: the urgency of the crisis, the chance to reduce further costs, the importance of having early examples, and the possibility of inspiring others. Our town meeting in Acton chose a 2030 target date for net zero emissions in our 2020 climate emergency declaration, because that was most consistent with the scientific consensus about how to avoid the worst risks of climate change. Now, I know that the state has adopted a 2050 target date. This 2050 date relies on scientific scenarios that require vast amounts of carbon sequestration via unknown or unproven technologies. And the same scenarios also explicitly ignore the risks of positive feedback loops, the so-called climate tipping points. See, we need to reduce these risks starting now using technologies available today. So by letting Acton go ahead now, we accomplish 3 other important things. We save everyone money, especially the state and federal governments, because every project that gets built today with fossil fuels will require expensive retrofitting to remove that system before the end of its lifetime. And we don't want to make the work of electrifying buildings more difficult and expensive by adding to the inventory of stranded assets. Next, we build experience now that can be used by legislators, regulators, and the home renovation and home building industries. So when naysayers say it can't be done, Acton and the other towns can serve as a counterexample. We will build experience and skill in fossil fuel-free construction that others can learn from. And finally, letting us start now creates an example that can inspire building owners, municipalities, and states to take action. Looking at possible state actions, I support the parallel bill sponsored by Senator Eldridge and Representative Gouveia that were discussed today at this hearing. And I would also heartily support a true net zero stretch energy code, which would provide a wonderfully comprehensive solution. Granting our home rule petition and thus enacting our bylaw will support both efforts by showing what's possible now. Times of the essence in the race against climate change. I implore you to help us act now on this most urgent challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder Grant. Are there questions of Jim? Hearing none, we want to thank you very much for having waited so patiently. We now want to hear from Quinton Zondervan, a city councilor from the city of Cambridge. Quinton is the first municipal official other than the 5 petitioning towns to appear before us. We appreciate his patience and look forward to his testimony.
Thank you so much, Chair Barrett. It's really good to be here with all of you. And I have been patient, but it's also been encouraging to listen to all this great testimony. So my name is Quinton Zondervan. I'm a Cambridge City Councilor, and I'm speaking to you from my family's all-electric, mostly solar, net zero home in Cambridge. And from my window, I stare at a recent Alexandria laboratory/office building that is LEED gold and has a green roof. And from my window, I can almost see Alexandria's new laboratory building that's being constructed further down the street, which includes a geothermal field to help keep their emissions down. So as has been mentioned many times, the technology is there, the economics are ready, we just need to move forward. So I'm testifying in support of 2145, an act promoting the adoption of renewable energy for heating and cooling and hot water from Representative Connolly. 2167 and Senate 1333, an act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by permitting local options. All electric buildings and homes ordinances by Rep. Covea and Senator Eldridge. H602, an act to promote energy and economic resilience through clean energy education and job pathway programs by Representative Golden. I don't think you've heard any testimony yet on that particular bill, but that's a really important component of taking climate action, is to promote green jobs. And I'm speaking in support of all the home rule petitions before you and any other bills that give us the ability to effectively reduce our emissions locally in cities and towns, while at the same time creating economic opportunity and justice for our constituents. As you may know, the Cambridge City Council adopted a net zero action plan in 2015, which was based on work initiated by myself and Representative Mike Connolly back in 2013. And the net zero action plan provides a roadmap for building decarbonization in Cambridge, where over 80% of our emissions come from buildings. So similar to Lexington, but on steroids, we have huge commercial buildings that generate most of our emissions in Cambridge. And our net zero action plan roadmap includes a timeline for when newly constructed buildings have to be net zero, starting with small residential new construction in January 2022. And you heard that correctly, that is right now as we speak. Followed by large residential and commercial buildings in 2025, and then laboratories in 2030. So unfortunately, we are currently prevented from implementing this plan by state preemption, as you've heard about. And this is really unfortunate, given that this deadline of January 2022 has been established since 2015, as I said. So we've had plenty of time to prepare for this moment, and yet here we are. While it's not on your docket for this hearing, the Cambridge City Council did send a home rule petition to the state legislature last month, which is similar to the other home rule petitions before you, asking for the permission and the ability to implement our net zero action plan and our net zero requirements. And, you know, we share the frustration about the net zero stretch energy code, and I really appreciate this hearing and this opportunity to advocate for giving us the ability to take local action. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions of Councillor Zondervan? I have a question, Quentin. I'm curious, so you can just instruct the committee a little bit about how calculations are made about the emissions that come from automobiles and trucks and other vehicles registered in Cambridge. I'm interested in the condition of the data that Cambridge today is able to obtain or not from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, because it would seem to me that ideally very good data on vehicles registered within the town, and of course mileage traveled, because each of us for insurance purposes reports our annualized mileage. So that's also a state, an available data point that the state government has access to. If we had access to RMV data on registrations within the community by the nature of the vehicle, and if we also had access to mileage traveled by each class of vehicle within a given municipality, we could more carefully calculate the percentage of emissions attributable to transportation. How do you currently calculate emissions attributable to the transportation sector when you come up with the figure, for example, that 80% of all emissions are attributable to buildings?
Thank you. That's a great question, and I'm not fully qualified to answer it. Our great staff at the Community Development Department does that work, and they often hire consultants to do those calculations. But my understanding is that, you know, we do have unfortunately limited data, as you point out, but we do have some data. And what I do know is that we regularly do surveys of Cambridge residents and commuters to get a sense of how many people are traveling by car, what types of cars are they using, and then we also do surveys on public transit and how many people are using that. And so we're able to estimate some of these values, but of course we can't have exact precision in those numbers. With the buildings, we are able to get the data from Eversource, although even there it's not great data because there's a lot of errors in the data and a lot of cleaning that has to take place. So it is a difficult process, and our staff and Mark Sandin mentioned this in Lexington. I think we also only did it twice so far, but I think we're pretty confident in that percentage as an indicator of our emissions profile, because we, again, like Lexington, have so many commercial buildings, and we have very good, for U.S. standards anyway, public transit infrastructure, and so a lot of people are able to move around.
Kristen, let me ask a follow-on question or make a comment. I thank you. My understanding, because I represent Lexington, is that the data is highly imperfect, which only argues that we ought to do something about that too. Coincidentally, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, before the Joint Committee on Transportation, we're having a hearing on S-2254, a bill that I've submitted to require that the Registry of Motor Vehicles supply to municipalities upon their request aggregate data of various kinds that relate to transportation within their boundaries. So I think we need to improve the flow of data from the utilities on buildings and from the Registry of Motor Vehicles on vehicles, so that we can, not just so that we can calculate these relative percentages a little more finely, but that in general, so that municipal level Green New Deals can be informed even more than they are informed today. So it's meant to be a helpful observation. Cambridge could use some help. My district could use some help. Every community could use better data from the utilities on buildings and from the registry on vehicles. And there are bills that would speak to these questions. I just wanted to, that's an advertisement for my own initiative before another committee. Thank you.
I fully support that bill. Thank you very much for putting that in. I'll mention two other things. We do have a parking transportation demand management ordinance in effect in Cambridge as well, which requires large commercial entities to report on commuting patterns for their workers, and also we do have another challenge because a lot of people are commuting into Cambridge for work. So even if we had data on the cars for residents of Cambridge, we would still need additional data for people who are commuting.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Good point. Thank you very much for testifying. Are there additional questions of the counselor? Keep up your wonderful community work. I remember Cambridge very well, and wish you well.
Always good to see you.
Sorry about that. I cut you off. We want to move on to Kate Warner, who is from the West Tisbury Energy Committee. Is Kate Warner with us now? I want to see if Kate happens to be on my screen here. She may not be, so we'll welcome her later if she joins us later. And we will move on at this point to Samantha Litkin, who's with the Rocky Mountain Institute, an organization working with a number of Massachusetts communities as well as communities around the United States on exactly these issues. Ms. Litkin, and I apologize if I've mispronounced the name a little bit.
That's all right. No worries. It's Samantha Lichten. Good morning, Chair Barrett, Chair Roy, members of the committee. My name is Samantha Lichten, and I'm an associate at the Rocky Mountain Institute. As the senator said, a nonpartisan nonprofit think tank focused on transforming the global energy system to secure a clean, prosperous, zero carbon future for all. Today, as the committee considers bills focused on enabling municipal all-electric new construction policies, I would like to highlight 3 technical considerations. First, there is a cost to delayed action on all-electric new construction. Massachusetts is expected to add roughly 500,000 new homes and 25,000 commercial buildings over the next decade, over 1 billion square feet of new floor space. Currently, a large portion of buildings are built with fossil fuel heating systems, despite a state climate roadmap that demonstrates that new construction must be all electric and highly efficient as soon as possible. Any building built with fossil fuels today will very likely need to be retrofit at higher cost down the road, at greater expense, and with greater stranded asset risk to ratepayers. Second, all electric new construction is technically feasible and cost-effective today. Studies have shown that all-electric construction can already be cost-effective in Massachusetts, with savings such as avoided gas pipe connections and using a single piece of equipment for both heating and cooling. As just one example, RMI analysis found that a new all-electric home in Boston saves nearly $1,600 in net present costs and 51 tons of carbon dioxide emissions over a 15-year period compared to a mixed-fuel alternative. And as the senator from Lexington mentioned earlier, organizations such as Built Environment Plus have also cataloged the rapid growth in all-electric or net zero energy buildings in Massachusetts. Lastly, local communities have a variety of reasons to act. Municipal policies on all-electric new construction have been spreading nationwide. Over 40 U.S. municipalities to date, including New York City, have adopted ordinances to the effect of the home rule petitions in front of you today. Electrifying new construction is one of the lowest hanging fruit to implement to mitigate climate change. In advancing these policies, municipalities may also want to future-proof new buildings and protect local ratepayers, ensuring all new construction is already 2050 compliant for state goals, though many communities have goals of 2040 or 2030, and avoiding expensive retrofit costs and locally funded spending on gas system growth. Or they may want to improve indoor and outdoor air quality by limiting local air pollution from fossil fuel burning in buildings, the subject of increased scrutiny by public health experts. And it is especially important to acknowledge that it is often environmental justice communities like Chelsea and East Boston that bear the brunt of the health and pollution impacts of fossil fuel infrastructure and the risks associated with a warming world. Policies such as the bills under consideration today contribute to reducing the cost of decarbonizing the built environment, though additional steps such as statewide regulatory certainty on building decarbonization and gas system wind down, as well as programs, staff capacity, and funds to support this transition can and must be pursued to drive the even deeper emission reductions necessary to meet state climate goals in an equitable way. So in conclusion, ensuring new buildings are all electric from the start is a benefit for the climate, for ratepayers, taxpayers, and the general public health of our communities. Policies requiring all-electric new construction are but one part of a suite of solutions the Commonwealth will need to implement to hit its climate targets for the built environment, but local implementation of innovative solutions can support learning and expansion to the state level and beyond in months and years to come. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Samantha, and our thanks to RMI, which does terrific work on this general topic across the country. Are there questions of Ms. Licton? Hearing none, we want to thank you and RMI for taking the trouble to appear before us today.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from Paul Shorb, if Paul is with us.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Paul. How are you?
Great. Thanks very much. My name is Paul Shorb. I'm a resident of Lincoln, Mass. I'm proud to have Mike Barrett as my state senator. So thank you
to be your state senator.
Excuse me?
It's good to be your state senator. I feel fortunate.
Thank you. And thank you to the committee for this opportunity to testify. So in light of the excellent testimony we've already heard today and to avoid repetition, I'm going to cut my planned remarks short. Let me just explain who I'm speaking for, and then I'll jump to the bottom line. So I'm speaking on behalf of 350 Mass, 350 Massachusetts. It's a statewide grassroots member-led network committed to a just transition to a climate-safe world. So I'm a volunteer with that group. We do much of our work through 16 local chapters throughout the state, from Berkshires to Cape Cod. And that work includes organizing our hundreds of active members and others to advocate for good state legislation aimed at the just transition to a fossil-free future. So bottom line, 350 Mass supports all of the above. In other words, both the 5 specific town petitions and the more comprehensive solutions in H2167 and S1333. Really for all the great reasons articulated today, which I won't restate, but the main points including the urgency of the climate crisis, the readiness of many towns to lead the way where we all need to follow, and the unreliability of waiting on the future net zero stretch code as a solution. So we should allow any town that chooses to directly restrict fossil fuels new construction, without waiting on the legislature's approval of the home.
Oops, you froze, Paul.
If available.
Oh, I'm sorry. We just missed that sentence.
Yeah. So, number one, we favor, like the Gouvet Eldridge expect we're a town that would choose that route if it was available without having to wait on the legislature. We think we should also reward these 5 towns who have chosen to be early adopters, letting them start as soon as possible to run the versions they've chosen for themselves, and serve as test kitchens and inspire and guide other towns. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank
you. Great work by this committee.
And our thanks to 350 Mass for weighing in here. Are there questions of Mr. Shorb? If not, I want to thank you very much for appearing before us and for your patience and having waited.
Okay.
Is Adele Franks with us from Climate Action Now, Western Massachusetts branch?
I am.
Hello, Adele.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. I am testifying on behalf of Climate Action Now of Western Mass. We are located in the Connecticut River Valley. We have about 2,500 supporters. And many of our municipalities out here are affected by gas moratoriums put in place by the gas companies because they want to build more gas pipelines. So when we first heard that they were going to put a moratorium on new gas hookups, we thought, well, that's really good for our bottom line because we're very, very committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We wanted to stop burning natural gas. However, what's happening is not that. What's happening instead is that some of our builders, most of our builders are in fact adding propane tanks to their new construction. So it's actually putting us further behind because burning propane is actually emits more greenhouse gas than burning natural gas. So we're getting put further behind in our goals to reach net zero. So we are asking you to acknowledge our plight and to rectify it by passing S1333 and H2167 out of committee with a favorable report. And the alternative to that is for you to be considering endless home rule petitions, which I doubt very much that you would really like to do. So I'm hoping that instead you will pass this, give a favorable report to the enabling legislation that would be statewide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adele, very much. Are there questions of Ms. Franks? Hearing none, we want to thank you. I find that point about propane to be striking. That's the way things are now getting done. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have Sarah Dooling from MassCAN, the Massachusetts Climate Action Network?
Here I am. Can you see me?
I'll bet you we can.
Here I am.
No, we can't see. There you are, Sarah. We can see you and hear you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Senator Barrett, Representative Roy, and members of the committee. It's been a really interesting conversation this morning, and I appreciate you convening this hearing. And I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Mass Climate Action Network in big support of H2167 S1333. Buildings, as you've been hearing this morning from so many people, are the second largest source of emissions in our state. And since the 70s, there has been the steady movement towards using gas to heat homes en masse, and data for residential heating use between 2013 and 2017 show that more than 81% of Mass residents use fossil fuels to heat their homes. That's a significant portion. I do want to emphasize that using gas-powered cook stoves significantly reduces the quality of our indoor air. And for people living in really poorly ventilated homes, these pollution levels can exceed twice the EPA designated safety levels when those cook stoves are in use. So this is a public health problem. Moreover, as we continue to navigate the COVID crisis, research from last year out of Harvard documented that people's ability to recover from COVID is compromised by unhealthy indoor air. As you all know, these dynamics play out particularly in profound ways in people living in environmental justice and frontline communities. So the Gouveia and Eldridge bills will support the ability of municipalities that we have heard on this call this morning, who are ready to move forward on requiring new construction be all electric. And while we continue to wait for the Department of Energy Resources to put forward its mandated net zero stretch code for municipal opt-in, and they are behind schedule, it is really urgent that communities that are ready and willing to be test kitchens be allowed to do so, with an eye towards opting into this more comprehensive building code coming out of the DOER. Senator Barrett referred to the Built Environment Plus's report in his remarks earlier. The figure is actually 87% of the projects in their database show less than a 1% increase in construction costs. So decarbonizing our buildings, including low-income housing, is not a cost problem, right? It's a problem about changing business models. It's a problem related to working with different kind of vendors and different contractors. So these bills, the Gouveia and Eldridge bills, support municipalities who know and understand the economic and health benefits that an all-electric and net zero buildings will provide people and communities. I want to just end my remarks by stating an equitable approach to decarbonizing new constructed homes cannot be achieved, however, only through a net zero stretch code that we are waiting for from DOER, nor can it be achieved by this proposed legislation. One more minute, please. A comprehensive approach to equitable decarbonization involves coordinating workforce development programs, affordable housing production goals and incentives, with other protections to ensure economically vulnerable residents in our state have access to the clean energy benefits of a net zero home, either as somebody who lives in a home or who is part of the labor pool. Thank you for your time and for your leadership.
Yes, and I want to thank you, Sarah, for participating, and our thanks to MassCan for its terrific work. Are there questions of Sarah Doolin? Hearing none, we will now hear from Mr. Craig Foley. If Craig is with us.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me, Chairman Barrett?
Yes, we can, Craig.
Thank you. My name's Craig Foley. I'm the co-founder of the Rethink 39 group at Lair Realty Partners. The 38 that our real estate team is rethinking is the 39% of U.S. energy consumption that's attributed to the built environment. We believe that with every transaction we're engaged with, whether it's working with net zero builders, building spec homes, or existing homeowners that have just done, the simple right things like air sealing and insulation upgrades, incentivized by the Mass Save program, our team believes that we can be part of a solution with every home that we sell. I also put my money where my mouth is. I'm working on a deep energy retrofit of my home in Melrose, and my wife and I have made the decision to fuel switch from natural gas to an all-electric home, heated and cooled with cold climate air source heat pumps, switching to heat pump hot water heater, and an induction cooktop. In working with my builder and architect, we're realizing that this is cost effective not only for the renovation, but obviously moving forward with the operating costs of our home. And as I look forward into my real estate crystal ball, I also see my home selling for more because of the choices my wife and I are making today. I'm also a real estate educator and teach the National Association of Realtors Green designation for realtors across the country. We always discuss state incentives, and realtors from across the United States are blown away by the Massachusetts incentives that we offer, driven by legislators like you, Senator Barrett, and the folks on this committee. By offering these powerful incentives for heat pump technology, solar PV, geothermal upgrades, we've really helped to propel a rapidly emerging green home marketplace here in Massachusetts. The next natural step is offering the opportunity for communities like the ones we've heard from today to adopt fuel switching and keep Massachusetts as a leader in climate solutions moving forward. I support the House and Senate bills, Senate S1333 and H2167, that give Massachusetts communities the right to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. Are there questions of Mr. Foley? We wish you well with your renovation project.
Thank you.
And applaud you for undertaking it. Thank you, Craig. Do we have Karen Apino in the house? Karen Apino? All right. We're actually at the end of our list of witnesses. Are there additional folks on this call who wish to testify before the committee? Hearing none, we want to, Chair Roy and I want to thank all of you for your patience this morning. It has been quite an instructive hearing, and the members of the committee appreciate it just as much as any of the listeners. So we want to thank you all, and we want to thank the legislators, members of the committee in the Senate and in the House who have stayed with us. If there is no more business to transact today, I will move that this hearing be brought to a close. Do I have a second?
Second.
There was a pause there.
I gotta
all those in favor?
Unmute button.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We want to thank all of you and wish you a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for a great job today.